Spartacus, 1960s Hollywood epic, directed by Stanley Kubrick, written by Dalton Trumbo, starring Kirk Douglas, Laurence Olivier, Tony Curtis, Gene Simmons, Charles Laughton and Peter Ustinov. The film won 4 Oscars, Best Supporting Actor for Ustinov, very deservedly, Best Color Cinematography, Best Color Set Direction and Color Costume Design. This was obviously during the time when there was still a split in the awards between the color and the black and white ones. And the film was also nominated in another 2 categories, Best Editing and Best Music. The movie tells the story of the Spartacus rebellion in ancient Rome and the politics in Rome itself surrounding that rebellion at the time. So it's based on real events and real characters, but of course with fictionalizations here and there. The story of the movie's creation actually goes back to Ben-Hur, another ancient Rome epic made around the same time. So Kirk Douglas was very desperate to lead that film. But when he didn't get the role of Ben-Hur, he essentially said, fuck it, I'll have my own Roman epic with blackjack and hookers. And he produced this movie instead. He got Dalton Trumbo to write it and used his influence in Hollywood to give him full credit, while Trumbo at the time was on Hollywood's blacklist for being openly communist and his scripts were only used under pseudonyms. Douglas also got together all of these other great actors, and he did it by asking Trumbo to write different fake versions of the script, modified so that each actor received a version of the script which would have their specific role increased in order to convince them to join. And finally they got Anthony Mann to direct, but shortly after work on the movie began, Douglas fired him, citing that he seemed overwhelmed by the scale of the project, and hired Stanley Kubrick instead. That didn't make all the problems go away. Kubrick and Douglas would constantly fight on set, having different visions of what the movie should be. Kubrick was especially hesitant about the character of Spartacus being boring and one-dimensional, and he was also more interested in the Roman politics storyline. He also insisted on having greater control, particularly over the cinematography, eventually just telling the cinematographer Russell Matty to fuck off, and Kubrick shot the rest of the movie himself. In the end, he wasn't very happy with the result, ended up disavowing the movie and never really including it in his own personal canon. Also, from that point onward, he would always insist on having total creative control over his next projects. So taking all of this into account, it is a small miracle that the film actually turned out rather solid. It has the great scale and scope, with giant sets, shooting on location partly, great cast and a huge production during the battle scenes especially. Apparently over 10,000 extras were hired to fill in the armies. I really like the angle of the Roman politics and can see why Kubrick would be interested in that. While the Spartacus story is fairly straightforward, what happens in Rome isn't. I appreciate how it's never really black and white. It's never really made explicit that certain characters are purely good or purely evil. They each just have different political goals, and even though the results of their actions might affect the rebellion in certain ways, they might benefit or harm it, that doesn't necessarily mean that they care about the rebellion itself, but rather that they're using it as a tool for their own goals. A good example would be Crassus, who at one point supports the uprising financially, but he's basically doing it to win control over the Senate, not because he gives a shit about the slaves. In regards to the main Spartacus storyline, I did say it was rather simple, and it is, but it was also quite topical, with the slavery theme being a strong echo of the civil rights movement in America at the time. I like the performances, costumes, music across the movie. However, I do want to compare it to Ben-Hur. I feel that it is a very natural comparison, as both movies came out within a year of each other, and both have similar subject matter, and are essentially, you could say, the same type of film. And in that comparison, Spartacus does come up short. I think it's mainly because the central character of Spartacus is more boring and doesn't have as much of an arc as Ben-Hur did. And I'd also say, for all its epic scale, Ben-Hur still felt more grand, and it has the chariot race sequence, which stands the test of time as an incredible feat of stunt work, whereas Spartacus didn't really have any scenes which would be greatly impressive to me. Still, on its own, I think the movie is pretty good and well worth knowing.